enlightenment was already destined to become a world teacher. Like, okay, one text is in the Sutta Nipata. I think it comes in Mahavagga. Could be, what's the name of the sutta? Nalaka Sutta. The Nalaka Sutta in the Sutta Nipata, where it begins with the devas, the deities, are singing and joyful, and there is a sage, a rishi, his name is Asita, who is able to see the devas singing and dancing, and then he asks them, why are you so happy? Why are you so joyful? And then he replies, we are joyful because the Bodhisattva has been born into the world for the welfare and happiness of the world. You know, so this is suggesting already that he's destined to become a teacher of the Dhamma in the world. So in that case, then the whole struggle, should I teach or should I not teach? It's already decided. The outcome is already determined. But we could say maybe this Nalaka Sutta, that section, can be a later literary creation. Apparently so. But there is another sutta, it comes in Anguttara Nikaya, where the Buddha is speaking about 5 dreams that he had before his enlightenment, while he was still a bodhisattva. And at least several of these dreams indicate that he is going to become a teacher. Like he says that he has a dream which signifies that he's going to have many disciples, both monastic and lay disciples. So if he had the dream before his enlightenment, and that dream was a kind of foresign of what will take place after the enlightenment, then it's suggesting that he was already sort of predetermined to be a teacher. So there are these conflicting strands. And so, depending on which strand one wants to pick up, one could lean towards either position. Like I know some people who come to Buddhism, these would be people who come from, I might say, the pragmatic, scientific, empirical, realistic angle. They say the stuff about bodhisattva vows, past life accumulations of paramitas, Brahma Sahampati coming down to plead with the Buddha, all literary embellishments. When the Buddha achieved enlightenment, he really wasn't certain whether he was going to be a teacher or not. When he was reflecting, should I teach or not, there was a real internal struggle. When he said, my mind inclined to inaction rather than to teaching, he really decided not to teach. But then he had second thoughts about this. And then when his reflection on the world came up, then that stimulated his compassion, and then he decided to teach. All of the rest is just sort of icing on the cake, but this is the flour that makes up the substance of the cake. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. But there's another way to look at it. Okay, now I'm really speaking with my own voice. Okay, Brahmasahampati, maybe the name is fictitious. Maybe the exact way this occurred is a little bit of a literary embellishment. But why should we assume, like, this is the only realm of existence and that there are not beings on other realms? Like, you know, you have a computer here. Could you check to see whether I got any emails? Emails, how can you get emails? Flying through the air? But, well, you're getting your telephone call, right? There's no wire. How is that telephone message getting to your telephone and causing it to ring? And now there are people at NASA who are getting messages coming from spacecraft that are flying past the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, other planets. You tell that to somebody, maybe we go to Australia, some of the Aboriginal, well, maybe they will accept it, but they would have less trouble with it. Let us say we're speaking to a 18th century rationalist. And then he'll say to you, a European rationalist from the 18th century, he'll say to you, what kind of nonsense are you speaking? What have you been smoking? So, from this hard rationalist point of view, like all of this is just nonsense, imagination. But we know, at least we have some idea how electronic equipment work, and so we can say, this is possible, this is real. And so by the same token, as a Buddhist, I would say that there are other realms of existence, and just as your relatives and friends far away can send you emails and telephone calls to wherever you are in the Kuan Yin Hall today, so beings from other realms can tune in to what the Buddha is doing and appear to him, like sending him an email message, or when they do an interview with somebody, the television broadcaster is in New York, but we're speaking to the great authority on healthcare who's in this office in Washington, D.C., and then they have this video screen, and then they're interviewing him on the video screen. Wireless, no less. And so, Brahma Sampati is maybe he's not literally coming down to the human world to speak to the Buddha, but he's addressing him through a video conference, teleconference, from the Brahma world. And even if it's not one individual, but it could be like whole groups of deities, divine beings, pleading with the Buddha, because now the Buddha is one through his attainment who's superior to the Devas, and so they're pleading with him to teach. And some ask, how could the Buddha, with his power of knowledge, omniscience, knowledge of things in the world, not already know whether there are beings who can understand or not? Again, there are several ways to look at this. One way is to say, this is a literary device which makes the dramatic, it sort of magnifies the dramatic impact when you have the Buddha saying, I won't teach. Then you have Brahma come down and plead with him to teach. Especially if you're teaching to like an Indian audience, and your Indian audience members have been devotees of Brahma, saying Brahma is God, he is the creator, he's the one we make offerings to, sacrifices to, and now they hear Brahma has come to appeal to the Buddha, ask the Buddha to teach. The Brahma bows down to the Buddha and extends his hands in Anjali. So the Buddha is superior to Brahma. So why should we worship Brahma? We should worship the Buddha. So it has that dramatic impact, also propagational impact. Okay, so that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is, there's another way that I see it. Actually, two ways I could see it. One is that in order for the Buddha to make that decision to teach, first he has to arouse his compassion. And maybe at that point, that inner change hasn't come within him. He's still sort of, when he does his initial reflection, he's still sort of under the impact of the realization of the Four Noble Truths and the deathless Nibbana. And so the mind hasn't yet, sort of the dust of the realization hasn't, or not dust, but maybe these will be the sparkles of the realization, You know, the fireworks still haven't stopped. You know, the fireworks, the Roman candles, the rockets, multicolored streams of light. The firework displays are still going on. And so he's not yet really able to see clearly out into the world and to really read the potentials of the living beings. And it's until he can read the potentials of living beings, his compassion won't arise. So that's one way to look at it. The other way that I would look at it is that again, this is a kind of dramatic effect. What we see in paragraph 19 shows that what I call the culmination of the movement of ascent. I see like two movements involved in the Buddha's career or in any kind of spiritual career. One is what I call the movement of ascent, which is moving from the lower level to the higher level. Then comes the movement of descent, where after reaching the peak of realization attainment, one re-engages with the world. And this takes place in many different spiritual traditions in different ways, at many different levels. So in order to, before one begins the movement of descent, one first reaches the peak of the movement of ascent. And on reaching that peak of the movement of that ascending movement, the purpose is to show that it leads to a kind of complete detachment and a complete, separation from all the entire conditioned world. And now, if the Buddha would, on his own, to decide, let me go out and teach, there might be those who will be standing on the sidelines saying, that ambitious son of a bitch wants to set himself up as a teacher. He wants to, surround himself with disciples and stand out as, big man on campus, big man on the spiritual scene. So to avoid that kind of criticism, you have to have the Buddha completely detached. Should I teach or not? Too much trouble. But then to show that impulse that starts the movement of descent comes not from the Buddha himself, no kind of ambition to set himself up as a teacher, but it's Brahma representing the whole world, saying, please come down and teach us. So maybe that will work. These are just different possibilities. Anybody else have any ideas? Please, young.
This stage I see as a review stage at first, as a review stage.
Review stage?
Yes,
yeah.
When he reached the enlightenment, and as other stages to get to enlightenment, there are steps of review at each stage. So I see this as kind of the final review, and as you say, there's still a little bit of dust or a little bit of...
It's not dust, but dust usually means like...
Right. Not dust, but...
I call it the fireworks displays.
Right.
Fireworks are still going.
Gold dust.
Gold dust, yes. But there is also, in addition, I can relate to your idea of detachment, and I thought that was being getting completely detached before this level. That stage of review is also a stage of integration.
That's a very good point. Very good point.
And part of that integration is also, I think, I read it as the realization of free will, and there's a crossroad there. Choices can be made. So that's how I read it. Like there is free will and choice, and it's also the choice to ascend and to go back in the relative world. That's a choice. There's a new path in the relative world, and that's the beginning of that path. So it's not the end of the road, in other words.
Those are very good points. So paragraph 19 can show that there's still this integration taking place. And then also that decision to teach, whether to teach or not, again it shows that it's a free will. It's not just the working out. I think I'm losing the...
It's actually on, but it's not as sensitive to your ear, I think, as it usually is. We can hear you.
You can hear it well, okay. To show that this decision to teach is not simply the working out of a vow that might have been made a long, long time ago, but it's a free and compassionate choice that the Buddha makes right in the here and now.
I'm paralleling this again, but to the idea of what I really like about this is if it's hard for me, imagine how hard it will be for others. Just something that you sort of put in there, and I get an image, again, Christian, of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Somebody else do this work, take this cup. But the idea of giving us hope that it is going to be hard, and that the doubt that comes for all of us even came to the Buddha. So don't be discouraged. If it was hard for him, it will be hard, but continue anyway. Take up.
That's a good point too. One thing about this incident here is that it provides a kind of model for what continues in several Buddhist traditions. And that is that when a monk is invited to give a discourse, this takes place in the Thai tradition, I don't recall it in Sri Lanka, but they'll have a member of a lay person in the audience is given the special task of coming up from the audience in front of the monk, and then he recites some verses. I think they're in Pali, but I don't know the verse since I'm not from the Thai tradition. But in effect it says, just as Brahma Sahampati came to the Buddha and requested him to teach, so we, your audience here, stand before you with our hands joined in Anjali, in this respectful position, and request you to continue turning the wheel of Dhamma that the blessed Buddha had set in motion. Then I think in the Chinese tradition also this is done. I remember when I was in the city of 10,000 Buddhas, this is in California, Ukiah, California, they recited some verse like that. Do they do that in Taiwan?
Some temple will do.
Sometimes they do that. Okay, let me just look at the questions from the internet. He says, looking at the discussions we are having and the various forms of Buddhism in the world, it seems the Buddha created more confusion by deciding to teach. Could you comment on this? The only comment I'll make is that even though he might have created some confusion, if he didn't decide to teach, then we wouldn't have the Dhamma, or at least a well-established Dhamma, and so we'd still be all wallowing in the darkness of delusion. So we should be thankful that he taught. Okay, second question. The Buddha thinks it would be wearisome and troublesome to teach. I thought after enlightenment, one wouldn't have to deal with these emotions. Actually, that's a good point, you know, that why should the Buddha think this is going to be wearisome and troublesome to me? If he were really compassionate, he should think, it doesn't matter if I have to go through a lot of physical exertion to teach, and people don't understand, at least maybe there'll be a few who understand. And so he shouldn't be concerned with the weariness and troubles that he'll meet. But again, what I would say is that this is probably, again, part of the literary embellishment to give some reason for the Buddha to initially decide not to teach. He has to think it's wearisome and troublesome. And then when he decides not to teach, then Brahma can come and plead with him to teach. If the Buddha doesn't think it'll be worrying and troublesome, then he'll just jump right at the opportunity to teach. Then, there's no struggle with the choice, no opportunity for Brahma to appear, and that great literary scene vanishes, and my career as a filmmaker comes to an end. Okay, third question. Why couldn't the Buddha, after attaining the Supreme Enlightenment, see what Brahma Sahampati saw? Probably what he means is, why couldn't he see that there would be beings who would be able to understand? Again, I say that probably he could see this, but if that was said explicitly, then we lose that whole dramatic incident. So, logic triumphs over, in that case, logic or what's reasonable would triumph over the grandeur of the literary scene. Did you have some comment to make?
Yes.
Okay, please take the microphone.
Because the Buddha had enlightenment, would that be something that is necessary for even himself to process before he could properly teach? In other words, it's kind of like having the carpet pulled out from under you. So,
yeah, that's a good point, and I think it connects with the point that. What is your name again?
Abra.
Abra, like Abra Kedavra, is that correct? Okay, Abra made about integration. So he had to integrate his realization. But actually, in some accounts of the Enlightenment, let's say the narrative of the Buddha's life, what is said is that immediately after his enlightenment, he spent, in some versions it's 4 weeks, in other versions it's 7 weeks, exploring the Dhamma from different angles, which we could say is the process of integration, or say widening the range. Like the enlightenment itself would be like a sort of straight, direct breakthrough to the essential realization. Excuse me? Yeah. But now, in what follows, he doesn't have to realize anything new, but it's sort of expanding the range of that to take in more and more aspects of reality in the light of that enlightenment.
yeah,
So that,
in other words, to change his behaviors and his personality, wouldn't that take years?
no.
Because of his new insight.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it would take years, though I would say that this is what was taking place in that 4-week to 7-week period, a kind of 4-week to 7-week period, a kind of sort of getting familiar with the terrain of enlightenment, and now getting familiar with what it's like to be a living being without greed, hatred, delusion, without any of the kilesas, the defilements, asavas. Yeah, but I wouldn't think it would take years to get used to that. I'd say for somebody with a mind as well developed as the Buddha.
Right, yeah, he did start from scratch.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay, then somebody else was raising their hand on this side. I think it was Drea. You could take the microphone.
Comment and kind of a question to you as to when he talks about it would be wearisome. He speaks a few times in the various Nikayas. There are sections where he says, "Oh, that would be a weariness to me. People not understanding, that would be a weariness. That would be a weariness." And rather just sit in a pleasant abiding now. There are times when it is right to go to the Tathagata. Ananda always knew, this is not a good time, no, this is a good time, go see him now. So it's just my thoughts. You know, yeah, I think you can be enlightened, but you're still human. I think it's going to be wearisome. You shouldn't get attached to it. We don't follow and cling on to it. But you know, and these are the things you translated. You know, so I was talking about in the Digha Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, in the Anguttara, in the Samyutta, there are sections where he says, this is curious to me. And this is long past his enlightenment. If you want, I'll have to go and look him up, which is not easy. There's a few times when he says that.
I'll have to check whether there are other...
I'm not saying they're all in every single, you know, but there's a few times when he says this would be a weariness.
I'll have to check whether there are other incidents.
I'll go look, and I'll have to go page by page in these two books.
Yeah.
And, you know, so, sure, why not?
I think, yeah, maybe because Ananda was the Buddha's personal attendant, so he would say, this isn't the right time to go see the Tathagata. That would
well,
be...
I'm just saying differently, just using logic, like, sometimes he says this here, here, and here,
Yeah.
and then, you know, Ananda always knew the right time, you know, so that kind of speaks a little bit about...
Because there would be times when the Buddha is sitting in meditation, then you wouldn't go and sort of pull
yeah,
him
he
out.
was in his pleasant abiding here and now.
Yeah, that
right?
means...
He sticks with the jhanas, and it's a way to abide pleasantly here and now.
Yeah.
Not just a tool for enlightenment, but it's a nice way to hang out, basically. And you know, also in terms of why, you know, the Buddha's omniscience, there's some, I forget which book it's in, but he's talking about omniscience, and he basically explains, yeah, I have the divine eye, I can do all these things, but I have to do it. He has to affirmatively take action to see what's going on. In other words, he wasn't looking. That's why he wasn't at that point looking at it. So they couldn't. But it's not just, I think it's sort of not like everything's just hitting him, oh my God, all this stuff. He can affirmatively choose to, let's see what they're doing in the Devaram. What's happening in the world? Where did you go after you died and where you were born? And what was the reason? He's got to actively make a choice and do it.
Yeah, this is the question of the omniscience of the Buddha. And in the early texts, the Nikayas, that's worrying and troublesome. In the early texts, we don't find an explicit statement about the omniscience of the Buddha. And sometimes the Buddha has to attend to something specifically in order to take action on it. So this is the way the commentary deals with this issue of, is the Buddha omniscient? And what it says is that the Buddha is not omniscient in the sense that he can know everything that is
all at once,
all at once, know everything that is happening everywhere in the world, and know every fact about the world. But what's true is that what the Buddha's omniscience consists in is the ability to know whatever he wants to know. But in order to know a particular fact or situation, he has to turn his mind to it.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay, we'll take the lunch break now, and then we could come back about 12 noon and continue this discussion. I was actually going to finish the sutta today, but I think this was an interesting discussion. For me, it's interesting to get other points of view on it, because, I mean, I just know what the text says. It's interesting to get other people's points of view. And I should just mention, before we close, what the commentary says, because the commentary also deals with this passage. And it says that there are two reasons why the Buddha hesitates here and doesn't immediately make the decision to teach on his own. One is to inspire in people who are going to read this, the idea to inspire respect for the Dhamma. Because if the Buddha just goes out and starts teaching, then people will take that the Dhamma is something which is very easy, very accessible, very, it's like when you see a book on sale, 99 cents, you're not interested in buying it, but or maybe a dress on sale or a suit, 99 cents. You think it's just cheap, worthless article of clothing. But if the same dress is going for $900, $999, you think, wow, that must be a very fancy dress, and then you want to buy it. And so when the Buddha decides, I'm not going to teach, then finally he decides, okay, I'll teach. Then one thinks the Dhamma is very precious, very hard to encounter. I better take full advantage of it while I have the opportunity. So that's one reason. The other reason the Buddha first refuses to teach, he knows that if I refuse to teach, Brahma is going to come down and request me to teach. And since people outside, this is in India, venerate Brahma, when they learn that Brahma has asked me to teach, then they will know that my teaching is something that even the great deity Brahma venerates. And so they'll show extra respect to the teaching. So that is the Pali commentary. How the commentary knows this, I don't know. But they probably just, the commentators also just use their reflection to come to that. We don't see anybody in the suttas come to the Buddha and says, Buddha, if you're so compassionate, why did you hesitate to teach? Okay, so we'll end with sharing the merits with the Devas, the Buddhas, with Brahma Sahampati, if he's still in this universe, and with all the people in the world, wishing them to be well, happy, free from harm and suffering. Akasata chabumata devanaga vidika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakantu sasanam. Akasata chabumata devanaga vidika punyantang anumoditva chiran rakantu desanam. Akasata chabumata devanaga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chiram rakantu mam param. Etavatacha hehi sampadam punya sampadam sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya bhavagupadaya vici etato etantare satakai upapana rupi arupi cha sanya sanino dukha pamuchantu pusantu nibuti. Okay, we do 3.5 hours.